In 1909, a physicist accidentally proved one of the oldest concepts in Vedic philosophy. He had no idea he had done it. The Vedics called it Maya. Physicists call it wave function collapse. This is the exact parallel, and it changes how you understand both. Not illusion in the sense of something that does not exist, but the appearance of a definite, separate, solid world, arising from an act of observation, out of an underlying field of infinite possibility. Geoffrey Taylor did not know he was demonstrating this. Here is exactly what he found. In 1909, Taylor reduced a light source to almost nothing, the equivalent of a candle burning over a mile away, so faint that only individual quanta of light could be passing through the apparatus at any given moment. He expected the interference pattern to vanish. One photon at a time, there should be nothing to interfere with. The pattern remained. Each quantum of light, traveling alone, was somehow interfering with itself. The double slit experiment has been called the most beautiful experiment in the history of science. Richard Feynman, who won the Nobel Prize for quantum electrodynamics, said it contains the only mystery of quantum mechanics. Not one of the mysteries, the only mystery. Because what it reveals when you follow it to its logical conclusion is something that no physical theory has been able to fully explain in the century since Taylor first observed it. The particle, when unobserved, does not behave as a definite thing in a definite place. It exists as a superposition, a wave of probability spread across all possible positions simultaneously. Only when it is measured, detected, observed, does it resolve into a single definite location. The Vedics called this Maya the appearance of a definite, separate, solid world arising from an act of observation out of an underlying field of infinite possibility. This was not casual speculation. This video maps the double slit experiment against the Vedic concept of Maya. Precisely. Not as metaphor, not as poetic parallel. As the same description of the same phenomenon one arrived at through particle physics, one arrived at through direct investigation of consciousness, separated by thousands of years. And then asks the question both physics and the Vedic tradition are converging on from opposite directions. If observation collapses the wave function, what is the observer? Let us be precise about what the double slit experiment actually shows. A source of particles, photons, electrons, even entire atoms fires particles one at a time toward a barrier with two narrow slits. Behind the barrier, a detector screen. When no measurement is made at the slits, each particle traveling alone produces an interference pattern, alternating bands of high and low probability, as if the particle passed through both slits simultaneously and the two paths interfered with each other. When a detector is placed at the slits to observe which one the particle passes through, the interference pattern disappears. Two clean lines appear, one behind each slit. The particle behaves as a classical object, one slit or the other, never both. The act of observation changes the outcome. Here is what most popular explanations skip. Between the moment the particle leaves the source and the moment it hits the detector, it does not have a definite position. Not because we lack the instruments to find it, because there is no fact of the matter about where it is. Max Born, who gave us the probability interpretation, put it this way: the motion of a particle follows probability laws, but the probability itself propagates according to the laws of causality. The probability wave is real. The particle before observation is not. This is the hard edge of quantum mechanics, and it is precisely what the Vedic tradition called Maya. Most physicists, it should be said, do not describe it this way. The mainstream interpretation avoids the word consciousness entirely. But a small number of the physicists who built quantum mechanics could not avoid it. When they followed the measurement problem to its logical conclusion, it led them somewhere unexpected. Who counts as an observer? This is the question that has divided physicists for a century. Does any physical interaction count a photon, a detector, a molecule, or does observation require consciousness? Eugene Wigner, one of the architects of quantum mechanics, proposed what became known as Wigner's friend. A human observer inside a sealed laboratory observes a quantum event, but a second observer outside the laboratory has no information about the result. According to quantum mechanics, that second observer must treat the entire laboratory as a quantum system in superposition. The human inside, the apparatus, the result, all of it still in superposition, until the door is opened. Wigner's conclusion was striking. Consciousness must play a role in wave function collapse. The chain of physical interactions alone cannot fully account for the transition from superposition to definite reality. The Vedics arrived at the same conclusion through direct investigation of consciousness millennia before Wigner was born. The word Maya is one of the most misunderstood concepts in all of Vedic philosophy. Maya does not mean illusion in the sense of something that does not exist. The world exists. The particle, when observed, is real. The chair you are sitting in is real. Maya means something more precise. The world as it appears to ordinary perception as a collection of separate, solid, independently existing objects is not what it actually is at the most fundamental level. At the most fundamental level before the act of observation, there is only the field, undivided, omnipresent, infinite in possibility. The Vedics called it Brahman. Maya is the process by which consciousness engaging with the field produces the appearance of a separate, solid, definite world out of that infinite, undivided possibility. The interference pattern is the field. The two lines are Maya. The Mandukya Upanishad, one of the shortest and most precise texts in Vedic philosophy, describes 4 states of consciousness. Jagrat, the waking state, the state in which the world appears as a collection of separate, solid, independently existing objects. Svapna, the dreaming state. Objects arise from consciousness without external input. Sushupti, deep sleep. The apparent world dissolves. The field remains undivided, unobserved, infinite. Turiya, the fourth, the state of pure awareness that underlies all 3. The observer before it becomes identified with any particular observation. Turiya, the Vedic seers would say, is what is present when the wave function collapses. The Mandukya Upanishad described the measurement problem more than 2,000 years before modern physics arrived at the same question. The 8th century Vedic philosopher Adi Shankara described Maya with extraordinary precision. Brahman is real. The world is appearance. The individual self is not different from Brahman. 3 statements, each one a description that maps directly onto what quantum mechanics would later discover. Brahman is real, the quantum field is real. The world is appearance. The definite, separate, solid world arises from the act of observation. The individual self is not different from Brahman, the observer, and the field are not 2 separate things. Shankara was not doing physics. He was reporting direct observations of the nature of consciousness. The convergence is too precise and too consistent to dismiss. 2 independent investigations of the same reality arriving at the same conclusions from opposite ends of civilization. Let us place quantum mechanics and Maya side by side on the question that matters most. What is the observer? Quantum mechanics, the unresolved question. What constitutes an observer? Does consciousness play a role? Physics has debated this for a century and has not settled it. Maya, the resolved question. The observer is Brahman, not separate from the field it observes. The apparent separation is Maya itself. The underlying field. Superposition, the act of observation. On each of these, the same description, arrived at independently. On the nature of the observer, the question physics is still working toward the Vedic tradition offered its answer long ago. The physicists who built quantum mechanics noticed these parallels themselves. Erwin Schrödinger, after years of reading the Upanishads, wrote that the unity and continuity of Vedanta are reflected in the unity and continuity of wave mechanics. This new view of physics, he said, would be entirely consistent with the Vedantic concept of all-in-one. Werner Heisenberg, after conversations with the poet Rabindranath Tagore about Indian philosophy, said that some of the ideas of quantum physics that had seemed so crazy suddenly made much more sense. Niels Bohr placed the Taoist yin-yang on his coat of arms. His motto, opposites are complementary, wave and particle, observer and observed, Brahman and Maya. They were not borrowing poetry. They were recognizing that the territory quantum mechanics was entering had already been mapped. One question sits at the exact intersection of quantum mechanics and the Vedic tradition. If observation collapses the wave function, and the Vedic tradition says the observer is not separate from the field, then what is actually happening when the wave function collapses? Is it the field recognizing itself? The Mandukya Upanishad says, yes. Turiya, the pure awareness that underlies all observation, is the field becoming aware of its own possibility and collapsing it into a particular experience. Physics has not yet answered this question. The Vedic tradition answered it a very long time ago. Here is what both quantum mechanics and the Vedic tradition are pointing at directly. Right now, before this next sentence, there is awareness. Not the content of awareness, the awareness itself. That awareness, the Mandukya Upanishad says, is Turiya. The observer before it identifies with any particular observation. And in the language of quantum mechanics, it is the observing system before it has collapsed any particular wave function. The interference pattern before the measurement, the field before the particle, Brahman before Maya. Notice that this awareness has no boundary. Notice that it is not inside the body looking out at the world. The body and the world arise within it. This is what Schrödinger called the unity and continuity of wave mechanics. This is what the Mandukya Upanishad calls Turiya. The observer that has been present through every moment of every experience you have ever had. Not separate from the field aware of itself. Geoffrey Taylor did not know in 1909 that he was demonstrating Maya. He thought he was studying the wave nature of light. What he was actually demonstrating, and what every subsequent version of the double-slit experiment has confirmed in increasingly precise ways, is that the definite, separate, solid world of ordinary experience is not the fundamental level of reality. The fundamental level is the field, undivided, prior to observation, infinite, impossibility. The Vedic tradition described this level not from the outside with instruments and detectors, but from the inside through direct investigation of the awareness that is doing the observing. Both directions of investigation arrived at the same field. The Vedic tradition is not alone in this description. The Buddhist concept of Sunyata emptiness describes all phenomena as empty of independent, inherent existence. Nothing exists as a definite, separate thing prior to the act of perception that produces it. The Taoist Wuji, the limitless, describes the state before the Tao differentiates into the 10,000 things. The undivided ground before observation collapses it. The Hermetic tradition, the all is mind, describes the universe as mental in its fundamental nature. The physical arises from the field, not the other way around. Three traditions, the same interference pattern, three descriptions of what exists before observation collapses the wave function. In 1909, Geoffrey Taylor placed a photographic plate behind his apparatus and waited for single quanta of light to arrive. Each photon traveling alone produced an interference pattern. He spent years trying to explain it. Long before Taylor's laboratory in the forests of ancient India, the Vedic rishis had already arrived at the same conclusion through a completely different method. Not with photographic plates and light sources, with the direct investigation of the awareness that was doing the observing. Two methods, two civilizations, 3,000 years apart. The same interference pattern, the same field, the same Maya. Ancient wisdom, quantum proof, direct knowing. This is quantum gnosis.